This is a story that's really been bothering me lately for absolutely no reason whatsoever. A few months back, I just had this dream that brought back this memory I tried to suppress growing up, but as of recently, it's been weighing on my mind. Growing up in 2005 on the edge of the suburbs, there was a large grove of trees and hills by some railway tracks that led to a big forest about half a mile from my house. When I was 9 years old, my neighborhood friends and I would ride our bikes to the railway tracks and walk to the forest to go explore the random pieces of furniture and junk in this peculiar forest. We'd play card games, do homework, and hang with friends out there for about an hour or two, but never sat out there too long. There were some small abandoned houses here and there in this forest that we stayed away from, as one neighborhood friend, Michael, told me there was a homeless man who lived in one of them, and if you saw him, you better run. So right off the bat, after hearing this, going near this house in the woods was scary as could be. One chilly November afternoon after school, I came home and dropped off my backpack at my house and immediately went to the woods. My bike was broken, so I walked. Michael had told me at school that day to meet him in this open area of the forest to play Pokemon with him. This was something we'd frequently do growing up, just to pass the time, until our parents got home at 4 p.m., so it was nothing out of the ordinary. As I crossed the railway tracks into the forest, I instantly felt a weird sensation, that feeling you feel when someone is obviously watching you. I looked all around and couldn't see anyone, so I thought I was just getting scared for no reason, as the rather overcast day was very eerie anyway. Trekking through the autumn leaves scattered across this large wooded area, I came upon the big open area where I was supposed to meet Michael. Near the area where we normally met was his notebook open. On the page was written, "Hey, I had to go back home and grab some batteries for my Game Boy. Wait for me here and I'll be back soon. Signed, Michael." I waited. Being alone, especially feeling like somebody was watching me, made this particular moment very uncomfortable. However, I convinced myself I was just being a wuss and decided to wait for him. I sat down and began playing my Game Boy. It wasn't too long until that sensation of being watched grew into utter paranoia. I kept frantically looking up from my Game Boy and checking my watch to see how long I'd been waiting. I'd been sitting there for about 30 minutes. It was beginning to get dark now. Then I heard some leaves crunch. I looked in the direction of the sound and briefly saw a dark hooded figure peeking from behind a few trees, hiding back behind them. My skin crawled and I immediately jumped up from where I was sitting and froze in my tracks, staring. I screamed hello to see if anybody was there. I was quickly reminded I wasn't alone when I saw this tall, dirty-looking hooded man peek back around from the trees. He called back, "Hey, buddy." I picked up Michael's notebook and ran for my life. I ran so fast, I barely had time to look behind me. However, I heard leaves crunching not too far behind. It was the man running after me. He was screaming for me to come back and, "I just wanted to talk to you. I'm sorry." I began crying as I was running, thinking this was exactly how those missing kids disappear. I ran and ran and ran until I literally tripped over the railway tracks and cut up my knees. Michael was just getting to the railway tracks. He saw me, dirty and bloody and crying hysterically, and I screamed at him to run. Without question, we ran all the way home. The hooded man was nowhere to be seen once we left the railway tracks. I last saw him standing in the woods, defeated that he couldn't catch me or something. I don't know. I told Michael everything and we never went back to the woods ever again. Years later in 2016, they bulldozed the woods and built a neighborhood there. We later found out from my fellow neighborhood friends who were in the area the same thing happened to them growing up. To this day, this is probably one of my scariest stories growing up. I'm 24, female, and I decided to spend my day fly fishing on the river with some of my friends. What started out as a pretty common day of fishing ended up being a very uncomfortable one. My friends and I hit the river a little bit before noon. We have a specific spot that we usually go to that isn't frequented very often, but due to the weekend, they did have more people than normal. Not as much in comparison to other areas, but still more than usual here. There were 4 of us in total, but we scattered around the riverbank. For the most part, I had eyes on everyone though. Right next to where I had my stuff set up, a gentleman decided to lay his stuff down and even set up a folding chair near mine. I was fishing, so I didn't really care, but after I caught one, I went to put it in ice, and that's when this guy initiated conversation. He introduced himself and I gave him my name, but didn't offer much more. He started making small talk, which I'm not a fan of. I never know what to say. I grabbed a beer from one of our ice chests, and he asked if he could bum one. I feel that was a bit of a rude question, but I gave him one as a good gesture because it was a holiday weekend. We always usually end up making friends with somebody, and offering a beer or two is usually one of our customs as a group, so this wasn't extremely off, but people generally wait until we offer. That's the point I'm getting at. I got back in the river and cast my line out. He stood about 5 feet away from me and kept talking. I listened to him. Not that I had much choice, but gradually I started moving away from him. He kept following me, which is a big no-go for me. He started making some very inappropriate comments and asked me some very inappropriate questions. Some are as follows. Do you have a boyfriend? I'll probably be a lesbian after this, I'm thinking. Are you wearing a push-up bra? I'm wearing waders, so how the hell can you possibly get that inaccurate information, I thought. When was the last time, you did the dirty? Probably more recently than you did, I'm thinking. What's the biggest you've ever had? In this river, about a 10-pound largemouth. Duh, I know what you mean, and I'm not biting. You want to go and have some fun? I was having plenty of fun before you showed up. All of these things I'm thinking in my head, and some of them I'm saying. I got tired of the questions and him not taking the hint, so I moved downstream where one of my guy friends was. I told him this dude was bugging me, I needed to find a new spot. My friend started waddling out of the river to go and talk to him, but he had moved away by that time. With the guy gone, we were able to continue fishing in peace. After a couple of more hours on the river, we collected our belongings and headed back to the parking lot of the fly shop we parked at. Moving all of our gear back and forth took about an hour by itself, and in that time I noticed that the creep was still around. I told my friend about him again, but I stopped him and my other friend from going over to him. Didn't seem worth the trouble. Plus the guy stood at about 6'4" to 6'5" based on my observations, and I just didn't want anybody getting hurt on my behalf. After about another hour, we all parted ways for the time being, but we were going to meet up later to cook our catch. I went into the fly shop to grab a Coke, which left me as the only remaining one from my group. This is where the story gets scarier. I was at my truck and had removed my waders and threw them in the back. Then I grabbed a t-shirt from my bag to change into. Lo and behold, look who walks up. Here my dumbass is alone in a parking lot and not close enough to the shop to go for help, and this creep says, "Wow, fire titties," and then refers to my shorts as coochie cutters. He was getting dangerously close to me, so I told him to get away. When he continued, I officially felt threatened. Thankfully, your girl packs heat, and I grabbed my pistol from my truck door and gave it to him. 45 reasons that he would be making a mistake. He immediately turned around and said that he was joking, then proceeded to speed walk towards the tree line. So yeah, there I was, boots, shorts, and a sports bra, pointing a 45 at the ground and threatening a creep. Wouldn't my dad be proud of me? I drove away feeling surprisingly normal, but pulled over at one point and started crying. I hate crying. It's such a girl thing. I'm only kidding, I guess, but I pulled into a gas station on my way home when I saw a wildlife and fisheries agent, where I explained the encounter and filed a report. He told me that he would contact the sheriff's office, who did reach back out to me this morning, where I filed a separate report. Unfortunately, I know how police reports go, and I know this guy won't be investigated, but I think I dodged a bullet, and so did he. From now on, I'll be sure to keep company with me until I'm ready to leave. Ever since I was a kid, I remember my grandma denouncing horror of any kind. Halloween masks, haunted houses, and scary movies. I had attributed this aversion to her background in faith. She is Hispanic and a devout Catholic. She believes anything horror-related is wrong, evil, you name it. So imagine my shock and curiosity when my grandparents shared a bombshell. Back in 1974, my grandpa convinced my grandma to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This would be her first and last scary movie. The weekends after the movie, my grandpa, grandma, my then toddler-age mother, and my aunts and uncles decided they would go horseback riding for the first time. Since everybody lived in Wisconsin, my family made the journey to a farm about 2 hours away. For the most part, everybody is in high spirits. Who can say no to a family adventure on a crisp autumn Wisconsin day? Despite the others' excitement, my grandma is worried. Since she doesn't care for horses, she chooses to stay behind on her own with my mother. When my family arrives at the farm, it is 3 o'clock. According to my grandma, she watched everybody get saddled up and then slowly ride off into the tangle of trees. The guide leading my family called out that the ride would last less than 2 hours, mentioning different trails, the need for breaks, and things of that nature. My grandma figures everybody will be back by around 5 o'clock. She waits with my mother in the car, playing games, reading storybooks, and trying to silence her bubbling anxiety. Needless to say, 5 o'clock comes and goes. No sign of my family. By this time, my mom has fallen asleep, which leaves my grandma with no way to distract herself from her worries. Finally, when 6 o'clock rolls around, she calls to a farmland from her car window. No way is she leaving the safety of her vehicle. She demands to know why her family hasn't returned yet when 5 o'clock has long since passed. By now, darkness has begun bleeding into the Wisconsin sky. The farmland assures her that everything is okay and that extra paths are taken throughout the ride. He tells her that her family should return soon. Now keep in mind, this was well before cell phones were a thing. Also, a week before, she had seen her first scary movie and it had scared the heck out of her. At this point, my poor grandma feels like she's living out a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She tries to contain her worry and begins a hushed, fearful prayer, until the flash of lightning that is soon followed by ear-splitting thunder. The noise wakes my mom, who starts to cry. My grandma must now not only ponder the frightening question of where her family went, but she also has a stressed, howling 2-year-old to deal with. It is now reaching 7 o'clock. The storm is growing more ferocious by the second. My grandma has to pee and her bladder feels like it's going to explode, but between the roar of the storm and the images of crazed country maniacs plaguing her mind, she refuses to leave the vehicle. She plans in her head that if they aren't back by 7:30, she is going to leave and find the nearest gas station to phone for help. Again, no cell phones during these days. 7:30 comes and her family hasn't come out from the woods. As she is scrambling around the car for her keys, she realizes my grandpa never gave them to her. The pound of a fist against her window shakes her from a whirlwind of panic. That panic amplifies by 1,000,000 when she notices a sizable, brawny man peering in at her. He is wearing a jacket and the hood covers his head. My grandma says that by now it felt like somebody had pushed a button and sent the world into slow motion. Everything crawled by a snail's pace. "Why don't you and the little one come inside?" the man yells. His words are authoritative and carry no hint of warmth. He isn't speaking from a place of concern at all. He's ordering my grandma into the farmhouse. All my grandma can do is shout, "Where is my family?" The man responds gruffly, "We're looking for them." My grandma orders him to call the police. The next words the man said made my grandma literally piss her pants. "We don't need the police." As he turns to go back into his house, he says, "You and the baby can come inside whenever you are ready." My grandma starts sobbing, wholly convinced that her family has been brutally murdered and that she and her baby will be next. In the chaos of this moment, she hears somebody calling her name, but because of the pitch-black darkness and her profound fear, she knows she must be hearing things. Then she hears her name again, this time even louder. "Dora, help me." It's my grandpa's voice. When she realizes this, she puts my mom in the back seat, grabs the wooden baseball bat my grandpa keeps under his seat, locks the doors, and then exits the car. "Keep calling my name. Can't see you," she cries. After what feels like an eternity, she follows my grandpa's voice to his location. When she gets to him, she realizes my grandpa needed help because he is guiding my aunt across the high rain-soaked grass. She had hurt her ankle. They are both drenched in mud and rain and covered in scratches. The rest of my family is nowhere in sight. Before my grandma can assume the worst, she hears my uncle calling for my grandpa. One by one, everybody shuffles out of the wild woods and through the tall grass. Everyone is soaked in mud and injured in some capacity. Cuts, gashes, limping, and unsteadiness. All are shaken up as well. When they finally make it back to their vehicles, the sounds of running engines and the flood of headlights get the attention of the man inside the farmhouse. The farm door swings open and the brawny man comes to stand on the porch, with an amused chuckle. He drawls, "Oh, you all made it out of there?" My grandpa shouts, "That dumb jerk left us out there and never came back." All the man says in response is, "I'll have to talk to him about that. You can all come inside." His freakishly flippant and joking attitude sinks into his words. He knows damn well they aren't going into his house. My grandma begs my grandpa to leave it and get them out of there. With that, my family tears out of there as fast as humanly possible. Once my family was back and home safe, my grandpa explained what had happened. During the ride, the guide led them deep into the woods to a creek where the horses stopped for a drink. As the horses rested, the guide told my family that he had to go do something and would be back in 20 minutes. My family thought this was strange, and my grandpa even anxiously joked, "You're coming back, right?" The guide simply gave a low chuckle and took off on his horse. 20 minutes came and went, and when the guide didn't return, my family continued to wait, as they had no idea where to go. They could see the sky blackening above them. They would have to make it out on their own. As my family rode off, they tried to remember the path back to the farm. They wandered aimlessly. Eventually, rain started to fall. Pulsing lightning and the crash of thunder spooked the horses. Everybody but my grandpa got thrown off their horses. When my grandpa climbed off his horse to help the others, his own horse galloped away as well. From there, it was a nightmare trying to navigate the woods while wounded and roaming through a thick void of darkness. The only advice I can give you is this. If you are going horseback riding, you better make sure it doesn't become a horseback ride from hell. I'm currently 27, female at the time of writing this, but the encounter I'm going to describe took place when I was 21. When I was 21, I moved to a new city for school. I didn't know anybody, and I was suffering your typical first time away from home loneliness. A lot of this had to do with being separated from my best friend for the first time, and I was desperate for some companionship. I took to dating apps to try and build some sort of bridge. I had a couple of dates which ultimately didn't work out, but I guess that isn't so important. I matched with this one guy. He seemed like the whole package. He was cute, and he was into music and art, and had a mutual love for Stephen King. We talked for a week, and eventually we exchanged numbers and continued talking in more depth. I was young and naive at the time, and to catch feelings for this guy, I honestly thought I was falling for him. We talked in depth for about another week. He got to know me very well, and it was very scary to me how much we had in common. We made a date to meet at the bar. He told me he was running a little bit late, and to go have a drink at the bar myself, and he would meet me there. It was sort of late afternoon, so the area was fairly empty. They had 2 other girls that showed up at the bar during my time there. One of the girls had broken her silence by saying that she was there for a first date with a really cute guy and she was nervous, and asked if I or the other girl had any advice for her. Oh, how crazy. I was there for a first date too that I was extremely excited about. The other girl was also there for a first date with a guy. We shared our thoughts and really hyped each other up. It was a total sister bonding moment. That was until we all drew the conclusion that we were all there to meet the same guy. Same pictures, different names, different personalities. This guy played us in a big way. Believe it or not, this was actually a huge letdown that turned into something good. The 3 of us ended up hitting it off naturally, and we actually stayed at the bar and talked. Since then, the 3 of us have become really close, and both are serving in my upcoming wedding. We just clicked over the mutual embarrassment. One of them actually lives with me now, and we truly became best friends. But on the subject now of my wedding. Over the weekend, I had my bachelorette party trip. My fiancé had his bachelor party trip over the weekend as well. He and his friends were staying at a fishing camp, while I and my friends were at an Airbnb not very far away. It wasn't a huge trip or anything like that. We just wanted to have a good time. Well, we were really enjoying ourselves. I had to go shopping one day at a nearby store where my longtime best friend and 2 other best friends joined me. Not to give TMI, but I had to buy a new bra, and that'll probably be relevant in a bit. That night we're playing Cards Against Humanity and having some drinks. It got to the portion of the evening where my mom wanted to go around the room so everybody could tell how they met me in a cringe story or anything they wanted to share. Wasn't looking forward to that, but it is customary, and did it lead to something? One of my best friends, one that I met in the bar, came forward for her turn and laid out the truth on the table. So apparently, that day, where the 3 of us showed up for a date with the same guy, was completely and meticulously orchestrated. She was having trouble making friends of her own, and she noticed me and the other girl at school. She made a fake dating profile after apparently hearing the 2 of us mentioning it at some point, and essentially stalked the app until she found us. This is how she got to know us, which is why we were able to hit it off so easily. She orchestrated the whole thing in order to make friends. Her cadence and her delivery of the story were so strange. So creepy. First of all, it was a big revelation, and it's a strong relationship built on deceit. I honestly felt very violated and uneasy. My mom cut through the tension by changing the subject. Later, I was out playing my guitar with my best friend and my other best friend. I'm sorry, I could have given them alternate names, came outside. We discussed it and also mutually agreed that it was really weird, and she picked a hell of a time to drop this as a bomb. So many things that once seemed so innocent started taking on a more creepy undertone. Just the day before, this girl was in the same fitting room as me, with my tits out while I was trying on bras. She has pictures of the 3 of us together on the mirror in her bedroom. I personally got out of that kind of thing in high school, but given the recent revelation, it just adds some ick to the mix for me. We've shared very intimate details about some of our lives, and I'm now wondering what's true and what's not. I called my fiancé that night and asked if I could see him. Not for the reason of what I described. I just missed him. He was thrown off by the story, didn't know how to feel about it, and also said he wouldn't have known what he would have done if one of his buddies did that to him. I feel betrayed. Maybe I'm overreacting, but if I am, I'm not the only one. I guess nobody got hurt, but it was a creepy way of taking advantage of 2 people who were vulnerable. I'm male 42, live just outside of Portland, Oregon, and I love going out on my own to have a beer and play pinball. I have an app on my phone that displays the locations of any pinball machines around me, and I used to wander around the city a lot before the pandemic, crawling between bars playing pinball. I'm married, but loud bars and pinball machines are not comfortable for my wife, and I've always enjoyed going out in Portland on my own and seeing where the night takes me. The Oregon mask mandate ended last week, and I only had a half day of work today, so I took the train into Portland with a hankering to play some Sopranos pinball. It has always been one of my favorite machines, partially because it is clever and full of innuendo, but also because I'm usually okay at it, meaning I can get enough free plays to pass a couple of hours on only a few dollars. So I arrive at the first bar where I normally play Sopranos, and I buy a beer and hit the head before feeding a couple dollars into the machine and getting started. It's immediately obvious that the machine is in need of maintenance, to the point that using my remaining credits was just a waste of time. I hadn't been out in a long time and I was determined to have a good time, so I pounded my beer and opened my pinball app to see if I could find another good machine nearby. I was surprised to see another bar within walking distance that also had Sopranos. I had never been to this particular spot, so I headed out immediately and double timed it. What should have been an 8 to 10 minute walk took over 20 due to a large area that was closed due to road construction, which forced me to go pretty far out of my way. The sun was setting and there was a huge group of blackbirds or sparrows that were flying around overhead. There were so many I actually jogged a bit to avoid the bird poop that I could hear splattering on the road nearby. The second bar was totally worth the walk, and it was a really fun spot I plan on going back to. The Sopranos machine there works great, and there was a guy feeding money into the jukebox and doing a great job creating everyone's playlist. I order a second beer and ask the bartender where the bathroom is, only to find out that it is closed due to a plumbing emergency. I already had to go really bad, so I thanked the bartender, paid my tab, and checked the pinball app again to see what else I can find nearby. I was doubly surprised to see that another nearby bar that I thought had permanently closed was back in business, and they also had a Sopranos machine too. Thankfully, this bar was a lot closer to the second bar than the second was to the first, and I made really good time getting there. The third bar is packed and has a great energy. I use the bathroom and head back to the bar to get a beer before walking through the crowd to the isolated small arcade in a room adjacent to the bar. I was ecstatic to find myself in a completely empty room containing a nearly mint condition Sopranos machine. I'm a couple of drinks into my first game when a younger guy in his 20s or early 30s walks in and asks if I want to play doubles in the next game. I excitedly agree because I hadn't had the chance to play against somebody in a while. I honestly don't remember his name, but I introduced myself and he started talking to me about how he was from New York and felt like everybody spends too much time on their cell phones. The world is going to hell rant, you know the one. He seemed depressed and in need of some direction or guidance, which I wasn't going to judge him about, as I was pretty much the same when I was his age. I tried to engage him and brought up some examples from history where technology shook things up, but ultimately improved things on a global scale after some time. I asked him what brought him to Portland from New York, and that's when the conversation took a turn. He became really evasive and made some comments about Portland being just as bad as New York. My hackles went up a bit, and I grabbed a drink of my beer and started playing again to distract from the odd energy he was giving off to me. That's when he really freaked me out by letting me know that he had been following me for the first bar that I went to that night. At first, I didn't even really think about what he was saying until he talked about how crazy it was when those birds were flying over our heads, even though he was pursuing me without my knowledge at the time. He also described getting into an altercation with the bartenders at the second bar, which was just crazy because both bartenders had been really polite and apologetic about the bathrooms being out of order. The pinball machine in that bar gave me a view of the bar itself, so I would have seen any such altercation if it happened while I was there, so what he was describing must have happened after I left. He is still talking as I'm playing at this point, going on like we are already really close friends, even though at this point I'm just making sure I have all of my stuff on me so that I can leave as soon as my ball drains. Grab my jacket the moment the ball drops, give the guy a quick firm pat on the shoulder, and walk back to the bar and crowd as quickly as possible, before triple timing it back to the train station, taking as many turns as I could along the way. I made it to the train without incident, but the encounter has sat oddly with me since, so Mr. Everyone used their cell phone too much from New York, let's never meet again, and also stay away from my Sopranos pinball. Last Sunday, I was at my boyfriend's apartment for the weekend. He left to go to work at about 8 a.m. and gave me a hug. This woke me up. By the time I could open my eyes, he was already out the door. He forgot to lock the apartment door on his way out, which I had not realized. I got up, put my contacts in, brushed my teeth, and put my workout clothes on, starting my day off right with some squats and crunches. Then I make some coffee and toast. Hop on the computer to look up hotels and restaurants my boyfriend and I could go to on our little in-state vacation. The entry door leads directly to the open kitchen and living room area, which is where his PC is. I hear the door handle turning and get excited, thinking my boyfriend is coming home for an early lunch at 10 a.m. The door quickly opens and an older man, 60s or 70s, steps in. My first thought is maybe he's the electrician that the landlord said would be stopping by soon. But how odd he didn't even knock, or... Oh wait, he's not wearing pants. Luckily, he was wearing underwear. This guy speed walked into the apartment with such a glossed over look. I was mostly polite in the beginning, saying, "Sir, who are you? What are you doing here? This isn't your apartment." I progressively began shouting and cussing him out though, but nothing would faze him. He went straight to the dining table and over to a large cardboard box my boyfriend had full of board games. He sat on them. Literally sat on the games, yes. It looked like he was going to take a dump on them. Then he tried lying down on the games. I got up and ran to the bathroom, scared for my safety, as I'm only like 5'2" and not as strong as I'd like to think. This guy was probably 6 foot and who knows how many drugs he was on. I dialed 911 and informed the operator everything that happened as I was shaking. She asked if I was able to safely leave the bathroom to let the police in. I said, "Oh, no need because it's unlocked, and that's how the guy got in," and gave a little laugh. She laughed too. I heard the cops at the door, but they were talking to each other. I opened the bathroom door and peeked in the living room. No guy. I was nervous about checking the bedroom because I'd have to go around the corner and wouldn't be able to see very well. Suddenly I hear, "Sir, where are your pants?" from the hallway. I'm standing right at the door to listen and texting my boyfriend everything that's just happened. They had the guy in cuffs, and the drug he kept shouting that they were hurting his hands. The officers asked him where he lives and what he's doing here. The guy said where he lives like 7 streets away and he's trying to go to bed. My boyfriend came home shortly after and comforted me. We went downstairs to see if the police needed my statement before they took off with the guy. They said, "No, we already got it from 3 other people, and we found out that he went into every unlocked apartment he could." An officer walked by with a gallon Ziploc bag full of pill bottles. He found his pants and shoes in the hallway. So, lock your door, folks. A little backstory. In my late teens, I think 18 to 19, I was no longer getting along with my parents and decided to move out. I wasn't able to get very many hours at my job due to being a full-time college student, which meant at my already minimum wage job for the very few hours I got didn't give me much money at all. Due to limited funding, my now ex-boyfriend's mother invited me to live with them. Now on to the story. My now ex and his mom were very strange people. I later found out it was because he and she were on very large amounts of drugs. Let's just call her L and call him B, to avoid issues. Anyways, L and B had a lot of very strange friends that sometimes would come and stay at our house for weeks. I was always taught to be polite to guests growing up, even if they weren't your guest or even if they were overstaying their welcome, which is probably why things in this situation happened the way they did. L had decided since it was Saturday that she was going to do some grocery shopping and B had gone with her. I was asked to come along but wanted some space, so I opted to stay home and be alone. I was unaware we had a guest at this time and was slightly shocked when I came out of mine and B's bedroom to find a woman around my age chilling on the couch. Out of politeness, I greeted her and made small talk while pouring myself a bowl of cereal. We quickly became friends due to similar interests and similar tastes in music and movies. Everybody else hated scary movies except for her, so for the next 2 weeks, she was staying with us and I had somebody to watch them with and secretly drink beer with late at night while chatting about bands such as Poison, Motley Crue, and Aerosmith. It was pretty cool. One night we were playing a sort of game similar to Truth or Dare and she dared me to tell her the worst thing I'd ever done, which to this day is still shoplifting a lip gloss from the store when I was 13 and getting caught. Then I ratted out my friends who were also stealing so I wouldn't be the only one in trouble. I then asked her the same question. Her response was, "Well, I stabbed my mom and dad in their throat. I know I shouldn't have, but I just hated them." At first I was shocked and stunned into silence. Then I started laughing because that had to be a joke, right? She said yes, it was a joke, and then she and I both cracked up laughing at her weird sense of humor. When I got up the next morning, I went to have coffee and our guest was gone. I was a little bit bummed out, but figured she would come visit again. Most guests came and stayed multiple times a year. About 3 years went by. I had dumped B not long after this happened and moved back in with my family. I searched for this girl on Facebook off and on throughout those few years and was never able to find her. Then one day my stepdad showed me a news story on the Google homepage. It was about a couple who had been stabbed to death in their homes and about their daughter, the one who did it, finally being caught. When I saw the picture of the girl, I recognized her instantly. It was my friend. I never found her on Facebook because she gave me a fake name and a fake phone number. Okay, so I, 21 female, and my roommate and best friend, also 21 female, live in a rental house. I won't say our exact location, but it is in Texas, US. She and I are both practicing Wiccans. We do rituals and meditations and have weekly coven meetings. I can't stress enough how much Wicca is not a bad religion. Witchery is not really how it's depicted in fiction. We don't pray to the devil, we don't sacrifice animals, and we don't harm anyone. Being a pagan in Texas is hard enough. Thankfully, in our area, it's not really a big deal as we are close to a college town, but as it is everywhere else, we do have our bad people. So we live close to an older couple. We're not like right next door or anything, but like close enough to see them, if they're outside. I was doing some meditation in my second story bedroom, so it's about 110 degrees right here now. So I was in a state of half dress just to combat the heat. Later on in the day, the man that lives next door stopped me at my car and said that he saw me naked and praying to the devil. And that this was a nice community and we weren't welcome if we were going to practice that evil shit, I quote. I told him to get the heck out of my driveway as I was getting in the car. And he said something along the lines of, "Keep playing near the dog's bowl. Don't be surprised when the dog bites you." I just flipped him off and left. I'm not a mean person, but I have low tolerance for ignorance. My roommate, who was a lot more introverted than I am, was confronted by the same guy's son who was a few years older than us, and he said that his mom was feeling scared because their cat had recently died and that she assumed that we were behind it. As two girls that have a cat ourselves, we were upset that anybody would think we were behind it. He also made mention that his dad had pointed out that he had seen me meditating in my room, but she had very wisely pointed out that he was the one looking through the window and that he wouldn't have actually been able to see anything unless he was making an honest and determined attempt to do so. This apparently angered him and he left. So we both wake up early this morning to run some errands before the heat got too bad. When we left, we found that all of our plants had been ripped out of the ground and thrown around the yard. Our squirrel feeder and bat house were also destroyed. Also, our cat's outside bed had been cut up with, I'm assuming, a knife. The biggest thing that bothered me was that a ceramic triple moon insignia that we have hung up on the side of our house was thrown into the yard and broken. Not only did we feel that our faith was attacked, but also our personal space. We called the police and filed a report. We told them everything that had happened with the neighbors, and they said without more evidence there was nothing they could do. This literally hit home for me. This isn't frickin' Salem. We're not here to hurt anyone. Anyways, just wanted to share what we were dealing with. I'll update if anything new comes up. This happened a few years ago when I was 20. I lived in a mid-sized college town with a pretty low crime rate. The apartment complex I lived in primarily housed students. Given that it was early August before fall classes officially began, the complex was empty. To make matters even worse, it was the brief period of time between August 1st, when leases ended, and August 15th, move-in day. So the only people at the apartment complex would be people that not only stayed in town for the summer, but also had renewed, or at least extended their leases. That being said, the complex was empty. Seriously, I swear there were maybe a handful of people living in this complex, which probably housed about 250 to 300 people during the school year, on that given night. That night, I was just chilling in the living room playing video games and doing whatever. All of my roommates had moved out a few days prior, so I was completely alone. Around 11:30 p.m., I was in the kitchen cleaning when I went to throw something away and noticed that the garbage can was almost overflowing. I took the bag out, immediately noticing that whatever fruit I had thrown away the other day was definitely starting to rot. And I went to open the front door when I suddenly was overcome with this feeling of dread, I suppose. I don't know quite how to explain it, but I just remember a feeling of coldness washing over me and my stomach sinking. My intuition was telling me that I shouldn't go outside. Of course, being the idiot that I am, I decided to ignore that intuition, primarily because the trash bag stank really bad, and I didn't want to have it smell first thing in the morning tomorrow. Plus, the dumpster was right outside my building. It would take me 1 minute tops to take the trash out. So I gathered up the bag and headed outside. Since it was such a short walk, I decided to not put on any shoes. So here I am walking barefoot down the steps and into the parking lot, carrying a trash bag and a box of recycling, wearing shorts and a tank top when I noticed something off. The parking lot, which would have 25 to 30 cars in it normally, was empty except for my car and 2 other cars. The odd thing was that one of the other cars was on idling, with the headlights turned off. It was a white truck, kind of beat up and old, with a ladder on top and some boxes. Hard to tell. That parking lot had a grand total of 1 street lamp in the back. I thought it was odd because it definitely looked like a work truck, given the ladder. There was no reason for that truck to be parked here at night, especially not with people in it. I was about halfway to the dumpster when I finally got close enough to see who was sitting inside the truck. From what I could tell, there was at least 2 men, late 20s to early 30s, sitting in the truck. The guy in the driver's seat closest to me didn't notice me initially, until the guy next to him pointed in my direction. As soon as that man turned towards me, my blood ran cold and I briefly paused. My gut was telling me to run back up into the apartment. Of course I didn't do that. I reasoned that perhaps they were waiting for someone, or maybe a drug deal. I thought it would look worse if I suddenly bolted instead of just throwing my trash away. So I continued walking towards the dumpster, trying to make it look like I didn't care about them and was just actually taking out the trash. All the while, the 2 guys in the car continued to talk to each other, pointing and gesturing towards me. Couldn't make out what they were saying, but the window was rolled down so I could hear them talking. When I finally reached the dumpster, the 2 guys had gone silent. They were now just staring, leering more like. I slowly lifted the trash bag above the dumpster. As soon as I let go, the truck immediately reverses. That's when I say screw it, drop the box of recycling and take off running. I hear the tires of the truck literally squeal behind me as I'm sprinting across the parking lot. I hardly even notice the sharp pieces of rock and other debris that are stabbing into the soles of my feet as I run. I made the quick decision to run up a different staircase than the one I had come down, in an effort to throw them off. I get back into my apartment, slam the door, and then lock and deadbolt it. I ran to the sliding glass door that leads out onto the balcony, made sure that it was locked, a little bit paranoid at this point, but hey, and then closed the blinds. I took a second to catch my breath before I realized that the blinds of my bedroom window are most likely open and my lights are on. I jogged to my bedroom, turned off my lamp, and then approached the window. That's when I noticed the truck, still no headlights, creeping through the parking lot. This one is on the opposite side of the first parking lot. The apartment building was situated in between them. It stops right underneath my window. I hit the ground as quickly as possible, hoping that they didn't see me. It's silent for a few moments before I hear someone shout something that sounds suspiciously like, "Damn it." I didn't dare look out the window again. I just sat there curled into a ball on the floor of my bedroom. After a few minutes, the sound of the truck's engine faded. I peeked out the window and was thankfully met with the sight of an empty parking lot. I didn't sleep that night. I had a few other encounters during the 2 years I lived at this apartment, but this one by far remains the scariest. The one good thing I took from this experience is to trust my intuition, even if I can come up with reasons against it. I have no idea what these guys were doing in the parking lot that night, nor do I have any idea why they chased after me. There is one person I've met in my life that I'm absolutely positive was a psychopath, and it was a 10-year-old little girl. The summer after I graduated college, I was living in a house in Berkeley with a few PhD students. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it wasn't the worst either, I guess. There were a few families living in the neighborhood, including the people in the house next to us. It seemed like a reasonably nice 2-story house, but on several occasions, there were police cars and/or ambulances outside the house. We never really questioned why, as police cars weren't a rare sight in the area, and we had only ever seen a young girl and her mom at the house, so there was nothing overtly abnormal or concerning. One afternoon, my roommates and I had just finished smoking a joint in our backyard when we heard a knock at the door. I open it and it's the mother from next door. I was a bit taken aback, and even more so when she said, "Hi, I wanted to ask you guys something. I really don't want to have to call the police." At this point, I'm thinking she must have seen or smelled us smoking weed, and while it was Berkeley, it technically hadn't been legalized yet, so I'm thinking we need to go apologize and talk our way out of trouble. But then I noticed this woman is visibly shaking. She was very clearly terrified and said, "I just don't know what to do. I'm having a situation with my daughter, and I really just need another adult to be there." My roommate Sean and I immediately agreed to go with her, while my other roommates look on, incredibly confused by whatever the heck is going on. The mother is asking some stoned students to be adults, so she must be truly desperate for help. Sean and I walk over there with her, and she explains that her daughter has some issues, which are currently manifesting as her standing on the roof of their house, threatening to drop her mom's work computer off the edge. Wow, shit just got real super fast. Sure enough, we walk up the driveway to the house and there's this kid standing on the roof of their 2-story house, dangling a MacBook Pro over the side. She's saying in this disturbing, singy-songy voice, "Look, Mom, no hands." Sean and I immediately make eye contact and we are both creeped out. This is not a normal kid. The way she is speaking reminds me of the twins from The Shining. She is not crying and doesn't seem remotely distressed. On the contrary, it appears that she is enjoying this torment on her mother, like it's some kind of sick game. The mom starts explaining to us that her daughter has had issues like this for many years. She has a psychiatrist and a therapist, and the mother has called both. They recommended calling the police, but the mom has been through this quite a few times before and doesn't want the child to go through the ordeal of being restrained and taken to the hospital again. She is frightened and exhausted and doesn't know what to do, so I just start talking to the kid. I tell her about how I used to love climbing on the roof of my house and now I'm into rock climbing, and I bet she would love that too. Besides, it's much safer than climbing around the edge of a roof if you make sure to use the proper gear and safety precautions. And the fact that she's so unsafe right now is really scaring her mom. I told her if she calms down, I'm happy to talk to her more about climbing, as well as show her the pet geckos we have that literally climb up the walls. I'm just pulling things out of my ass at this point. I have no idea what to say or how to mediate a situation like this, but I'm just trying to diffuse the tension and get her to calm down. She's flat out ignoring me at first, continuing to taunt her mom, but eventually she seems to get bored or irritated with my attempts to engage her, turns around and climbs back towards the window where she got onto the roof. She runs down the stairs out to meet us, then says in some weirdly singy-songy fake, "Come play with us, Danny" voice, "I dropped your computer on the roof and now it's broken." "I'm sorry, Mom. Do you forgive me?" There was zero remorse whatsoever in her voice. It sounded so disturbing and manipulative. I was blown away that it was coming from a 10-year-old girl and not some demon child from a horror movie. The mom is still shaking and just looks overwhelmed, so I offer to go up and get her computer from the roof. She agrees and escorts me through the house up the stairs with her daughter trailing behind. It appears to be a perfectly normal, well-maintained middle-class home. The girl is clearly irritated with me spoiling her game and repeatedly orders me to leave. I ignore her, climb out the window onto the roof, and see the laptop is sitting by a gutter seemingly unscathed. I climb back through and hand it to the mom. At this point, the girl realized her bluff was called and skipped off to her room. Mom proceeds to explain to me that this whole thing was triggered by her changing the password to her laptop after the girl logged into it, stole her mom's credit card, and ordered over $2,000 worth of stuff. This girl is freaking 10 years old. She's been pulling stuff like this her entire life, I guess, and nobody understands why. They had to move the girl's younger sibling into a separate apartment with her father because they were afraid that she would hurt him. The mom was crying at this point, saying they really tried their best to get her the help she needs, and they are just at their wits' end, and I did my best to reassure her. Gave her my phone number and told her to contact me if she needs help in the future. Sean and I noped the heck out of there after that and went back to our house. She never contacted me and we moved out a few months later. This happened a few months ago. I, 23 male, was driving home from a trip to the store while talking to my friend on the phone around 9 or 10 p.m. I pull into my driveway, park, and talk to my friend for a few minutes while I'm sitting there in my car. All of a sudden, this sketchy car pulls up directly behind me. There's no way I could back out without hitting the passenger side of it. It's dark. My driveway lights are kind of dim, and they deliberately turned off the lights of their car when they pulled up behind me. But I faintly spotted 3 guys sitting in it. I'm feeling pretty creeped out, so I asked my friend what I should do, and we both decided I should wait it out a bit and see if they leave. A few more minutes go by and they're still there. Eventually, we figured that the best plan of action would be to stay on the phone, calmly grab my bags from the trunk without breaking eye contact with the people in the car, and walk to the door, which is only about 15 feet away. In hindsight, it probably would have been a better idea to just call my parents and ask them to open the door for me from the inside. I stepped outside, then grabbed my stuff from the trunk. The guy in the rear passenger seat of their car cracks the door open, and the guy in the front passenger seat is staring me down still. They are definitely assessing if I'm a viable target, I'm thinking. I kept eye contact with them, but I felt like a deer in the headlights. It felt like ages, but it must have been 2 to 3 seconds at most. Suddenly, the guy in the rear shouts something to his buddies along the lines of, "Oh, it's a guy." Shuts the door, and then they speed away at like 80 miles per hour on a residential street. I was relieved, but mostly confused. I updated my friend and let them know I'm alright, then I walked inside. I'm male, 5'9", and slightly overweight with a bit of a baby face. So I don't exactly come across as intimidating to most people I meet. So I doubt I scared them off because of my appearance alone. I'm terrified to think of what could have happened to me if I were a female. It's legitimately messed up. Why am I safe from these things while my sister and my female friends have no choice but to keep guns in their cars, get tiny cans of pepper spray for their keychains, and avoid being alone in general? It's a scary place out there. Whether you're male or female or anything else, always be vigilant. I used to think my neighborhood was relatively safe, but now I'm afraid of sitting in my driveway at night. When I was 15, my best friend at the time invited me along to check out our youth club. It wasn't like a church youth group or anything, although it did kind of have a religious message to it, but mostly it was a group of teens from all walks of life. Mostly kids from rough backgrounds, being able to get together and have some fun for a few hours one night a week, interacting with other kids and just forgetting about life for a bit. My best friend really enjoyed it, and each Friday morning at school I would be subjected to her praises of the group the night before and all the cool things they did. So one Thursday after school I went along with her, and she was right. It was fun. There were 3 leaders, and they were all people in their 20s and early 30s. We played games and did a lot of group activities, but there was also a place to do schoolwork or get extra help if needed. I went along with her the next week as well, and I remember being really flattered and feeling really special when one of the leaders singled me out and praised me. He ended up giving me special attention most weeks when I did actually go. I didn't go every week, but I was pretty much a regular. There were a few times when I won a game of some sort, and he told me to hang around afterwards and wait for him, and he would get me a prize. I'd follow him into one of the back rooms, and he'd give me a chocolate bar as my prize. I realize now that anything could have happened in that back room at the center, because it was mostly a disused room, so nobody would have thought to look for me there. But it was also poorly lit. He could have done anything to me, but he didn't. I didn't have a male figure in my life, and my mom and I weren't the best of friends when I was a teenager, so I really looked up to this guy and just thought he was cool. He wasn't an authority figure like all the other adults, so I really felt special when he gave me attention. There was one time my friend and I were walking home from school and we were smoking. He drove past, and then when he saw it was us, he turned back around. We thought we were in so much trouble, but he said that it was better that he knew. He even told us that he smoked himself and then offered to ride us home. My friend lived not that far away, so she was home before me. For 10 minutes it was just me and him, and again, now that I think about it, anything could have happened, but it didn't. He asked me about my favorite bands and music, movies, and TV shows. We had a fun time. When we pulled up near my house, he put his hand on my knee and squeezed it, telling me that he'd hoped to see me at that group that Thursday. I didn't think anything of it at all. It didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. There were gifts too. He gave me a USB once with about 100 movies downloaded onto it. Gave me a poster from my room of a band I liked. He even one day after the group ended, gave me some cigarettes from his pack. The light touches continued. He'd walk past me and pull my ponytail, or he'd playfully slap my arm. There were compliments about my hair or what I was wearing. Again, in my mind, there was nothing weird going on at all. I thought it was normal, and I felt special and flattered. One day, he found me on social media and sent me messages through Facebook. He started out nice and then got weird. I was 16 by this stage, and I was just starting to have proper crushes and notice boys. He asked if there were any boys I liked, or if I knew of any at my school that liked me. He asked if I'd ever been kissed, and I'll never forget that afternoon because I was cleaning my room, and my phone pinged with a message. It was from him. He asked me if I'd ever touched myself or had dirty thoughts. I was so embarrassed that I quickly put my phone back and didn't message him for 2 days after. He apologized profusely and told me not to tell anyone, but my mom happened to see over my shoulder, and she asked who all the messages were from. I asked her a question about what he had asked me, thinking it was normal for boys to ask that question, not seeing anything wrong, despite the fact that I had been embarrassed by it, and she flipped. I didn't understand at all what was going on, and she demanded to see the phone and the messages. She wanted to know everything. There was no youth group after that, and I never saw him again. At the time, I didn't understand the situation or what was going on. Mom and I have never spoken about it properly, but I can only assume she notified somebody about it. A week later at school, I was taken out of class, and some people asked me some questions about the youth leader, and I told them all. I don't know what happened to him, and I don't know if he'd done it before or if he did it again. Sometimes I wonder if he was trying to groom me. It was definitely creepy, and I understand the scope of the situation now, that it's nearly 10 years on. So this event just happened to me about 30 minutes ago, and I'm still creeped out by it. I'm writing this story out on a different public bus as we speak, so I apologize if this story seems a little bit rushed. I live in a specific city in the northeast of Scotland, and as a result, I rely heavily on public buses to get to and from my local university. I have come across a few different weirdos in my short time here in the city, but this is certainly the most bizarre out of them all. I'm currently an art student, and today I was meant to be working on a specific project for this semester. I soon realized I forgot the camera I so desperately needed. I wasn't technically meant to be in class until the afternoon, so I made the decision to jump on the next bus I saw, heading back to my flat. Who knew this would end up being a mistake? The bus journey started off like any other. People got on, people got off. People are generally avoiding all conversations. Nothing unusual in the slightest. As for myself, I was absent-mindedly looking out the window as I usually do, just casually watching the world go by when the elderly lady in question decided to take the seat next to me. At first glance, she looked completely harmless. She was an elderly lady after all. I say she was maybe 70 years old, Middle Eastern in origin, sporting a thick white jacket and dark-tinted sunglasses. Completely harmless, if not a little bit weird. And you'll see why in a minute. At first, I assumed she wanted to engage in small talk with me, asking me about the bus's destination and the economy, now that Brexit is a thing. I don't particularly enjoy small talk, but I would never be rude towards anyone who wanted to exchange conversation with me. I like to think I am pretty respectful overall. She then started to ask me about me as the conversation shifted towards me. She asked all the standard questions like, "Are you from around here?" or "What are you up to today? Do you go to university? When's your stop?" All of which I politely answered. I saw no harm in doing so. I have way too much respect for the elderly in that way. She then started quizzing me about my family, whether or not I have a grandmother, and of course, whether I have a boyfriend. Oh, how that last question annoys me. I identify as lesbian, and I do understand some people are uncomfortable with me outright saying I have a girlfriend, so I always referred to her as my partner. It's just much easier to say it that way, I believe. So then she asked me if my partner was a man or a woman, and it was then I told her the truth. If people tend to ask me that, then I'm sure it's safe to assume that it's okay to reveal the gender of my loved one. That's when it got really weird damn quickly. She then followed up on this inquiry with these questions, all of which made me feel really weird. Why did you choose to be with a woman? Why did you not like being with a man? Do you hate men? Have you ever been with a man? Is it better with a woman? What do you and your girlfriend do? Then she started getting very specific, saying things like, "Are you on top or bottom?" or "Do you penetrate each other?" or "Is it just oral?" At this point, I was beyond uncomfortable. You can't just ask a complete stranger about this, especially in such gross detail and on public transportation. This is way beyond weird. I politely told her that this conversation was inappropriate and I didn't feel okay talking about this with her, but she persisted. I said nothing until I got off the next available stop. She then got off at the same exact stop as me to begin following me through the busy streets of the city. Thankfully, I managed to lose her in the crowd by entering one of the many shopping malls, making sure to lose her. Once I was sure I lost her, I boarded the next bus and managed to get to my flat safely. This is certainly one of the most bizarre encounters I've ever experienced. If anybody can give me an explanation as to why she was asking me all these weird questions, then feel free to share, but I'm still very creeped out by this. I won't be boarding that bus again anytime soon, I can promise you that. When I, 25 female, was newly 16 in 2011, I went to China on a 10-day trip for high school students sponsored by our local Midwestern university. On one occasion, we were in a large market on the basement level of a shopping center in Beijing. I can't remember exactly where. We were supposed to be using the buddy system, and I was buddies with a boy that I have stayed friends with over the years. While looking around the large market, we got separated for a few minutes, visiting different stalls, but I just assumed my friend was close by and could see me. I walked into a shop stall by myself to look at some of those tacky souvenir canvas bags that you can find in any major city. I browsed for a couple of hours, not paying attention to the fact that I was the only one in the stall, when a small middle-aged Chinese woman came up to me and grabbed me tightly around the arm. In broken English, she told me that she had more purses and bags in her secret shop and started pulling me towards the back of the store. Taken aback, I said I didn't want to look. In front of me, a man was pushing open a door at the back of a wall that had bags hanging all over that would have appeared to be part of the display. I just remember being incredibly confused and hesitant. She was holding onto my arm so tight it hurt while pulling me forward, and I just remember in that moment looking around quickly. Then I see my 6'2" tall male friend running over. He came and grabbed my other arm, and when she saw him, she immediately let go, walked off, and the man shut the door. I don't know exactly what was going on, but I do know that I was very young and naive at the time, and that I am very fortunate I had a watchful friend. When I was 20, I spent a semester abroad in Copenhagen. I lived in a house in the suburb just north of the city, and I had spent the evening having some drinks with friends in the city center. I was the only friend who lived in that direction, so I got on the S train by myself. I did this every day to get to and from class to go home. A male friend offered to go with me, but I didn't want to inconvenience him with an extra trip, so I declined. The train ride was 20 to 30 minutes, and the second stop, a dark-haired middle-aged man, sat down across from me. Even though I had been drinking, I wasn't drunk, and by this point in my life, I had learned how to be just a little bit more careful of my surroundings. I busied myself with my phone, and he asked me how I was in Danish. Many people assumed I was because I am pale and blonde. My barely passable Danish was even worse if I had any alcohol, so I apologized and said that I only spoke English. In choppy English, he said he was Spanish and didn't speak much English himself. I just smiled and nodded, hoping he would understand that we couldn't talk. However, he kept trying to ask me questions though, and I decided to be polite and asked how he was doing in my incredibly poor Spanish. He took that as an invitation to ask more questions, and I could barely understand a thing. He was visibly frustrated I couldn't converse with him, and then tried to ask if I was with friends or if I was from here. Subtle red flags. I thought about getting off the train early, but I didn't want to get lost. I had only been there a few weeks at this point. 10 minutes later, I got to my stop and got off the train. I very much noticed he also got off the train just before the door closed. Usually I walked home. It was a 15-minute walk from the station to my house, and on normal days, it was a pleasant walk through a residential neighborhood. He followed me through the tunnel under the tracks to the other side, and luckily a city bus was outside the station. I immediately got on, showed the driver my pass, and sat right behind him. It was late at night, and I was the only one on the bus. This driver must have been perceptive and understood something was amiss because he looked at me and asked in English, not Danish, where my stop was. I told him and he closed the door right after. As the bus pulled away, I saw the Spanish man standing outside the station, staring at me through the windows. He turned away and walked back through the tunnel under the station towards the platform. Both experiences were a combination of good timing and understanding people, but it is frustrating to think that I needed or should have had the help of a male friend in these scenarios. The world isn't always a friendly place. One night around 11 p.m., my mom and I were sitting in the room. My dad and sister were in bed, and my mom was asleep on the couch and I was playing PUBG Mobile. At one point, I could hear noises coming from the hallway. Thinking it was the cats, I brushed it off. I started to hear more noise and thought, what the heck are they doing? Then I saw something roll on the floor by the dining room table and one of the cats walking up to it. Again, thinking it was the cats. The object, however, was placed on top of a vanity that we have in the hallway. They don't go on top of that, but we do have a 9 to 10 month old curious kid. I then heard a male voice. At first I thought it might be one of my teammates in the game talking. I quickly realized it was not. I then thought my dad got up, which is pretty common for him. So I asked my mom, didn't realize she was falling asleep, if my dad had come down and it was him. She sleepily said yes, so I tried to brush it off again. Suddenly I see this thing, which I found out after was cleaning wipes for the interior of the cars that were placed on the vanity, flying at me and landing on the floor on the stool in front of me. I don't remember, I thought. That can't be the cats. I got up and walked over to the hallway. I got to the step when I realized that my dad's walking stick and a straw hat that was on top of our coat hanger were on the floor. Neither cat has ever got on top of it. I walked up the step and heard movement in the office. It was dark. The office is right next to the front door, about 2 meters from the living room front door. I thought it might be my sister looking for something. Then this guy gets up, comes out of the room, goes to the front door, unlocks it, and walks out. He was wearing a hoodie and I didn't see his face. I was paralyzed with fear and confusion. My mind immediately went, do I know him? After he left, I yelled out to my mom that somebody just walked out. She was obviously confused and concerned. We realized he came in from the back door, which was unlocked. He either climbed the gate, which is about 2 meters high, I think, walked up the neighbor's stairs, and then over the wall. You can see the back door from the street. The only things he took were the back door keys and a Bluetooth player, we believe, which we don't really care much about. We made a barricade that would make noise if he came back and sat with knives and a big too prolonged fork until about 5 a.m. We had another lock, so Dad changed it the next day. I slept with the knife under my bed that night. Looking back, I wish I had done something. I played rugby for 2 years. I know the basics to tackle, but I couldn't move. Obviously because of fear, but my brain was also trying to understand what was going on. I probably could have taken him on. He was very thin and looked between 17 and 19. 20 at most, judging by his style and body. We think that we might know who did it, but they didn't technically break in. They only took 2 things. Walked past all of our valuables, and he didn't do anything to us. It almost looked like he was trying to get my attention as well. Almost as if it were a bet, and he tried to find a reason to get out. Either that, or he's the worst robber I've ever heard of. I'm just happy my sister wasn't bad. It probably would have been a different story if she had been there with us. A lot of people think they know how they would react in certain situations. I am living proof you don't. I thought I'd scream at least, but nothing. We now lock our doors every night. Every time I hear a noise, I get a little bit frightened, but I'm okay. If he wanted to hurt me, he would have tried. We got lucky. This just happened an hour ago, and I still can't shake the feeling. This evening, I needed to run to the grocery store with my husband and 2 of our kids. We all wore our masks and tried to make the trip as quick as possible. As we were leaving one area on one end of the store, an older gentleman, maybe in his mid-70s, was passing us. My daughter, who was only 7, had to let go of my hand to get on one side while I waited with the cart. He bent down and crowded her space so much that she was hunched against an end cap. He asked if she wanted to switch masks because hers was prettier than his. I immediately startled, feeling tingly all over, and my stomach started to knot. I quickly moved around to grab her hand, did the nervous lapping it off, and we started walking to the other end of the store. I still had this feeling, so when we got to the last aisle, I looked back. He was still standing there in the way, staring at her. He quickly looked away when he saw me watching him. I grabbed her hand tighter, filled my husband in, and we both became hyper-aware of our surroundings. When going to check out, he was there, so we went to another aisle until he was out of the store. My husband knew one of the workers, and when we told him, he said the man was irregular and harmless. Maybe so, but that sick feeling was there for a reason. We paid for our things and scanned the parking lot when leaving. I hate that this is the world we live in. It may have always been this way, but I feel like everybody is more aware of it now. I'm well aware of the pandemic, by the way. I'm well aware that a family trip to the store may seem stupid. With my job, I have to be careful. I take all the precautions for my family and my kids. My kids 11, 10, and 7 have been stuck indoors for the better part of 3 months when their school got shut down. They only recently started going back part-time. 2 of the 3 have ADHD. That's not the most difficult thing for a child to have it, but it does suck so bad most of the time. But if they can get 5 minutes of normalcy in a small town, store during non-busy hours, then we mask up, wash hands, sanitize carts, and we go in. It gives them some much needed change and calms them down a bit, and it allows me to have a calm evening and get some sleep. I'm not sure if this even qualifies as creepy since it might just be a weird joke, but here goes nothing. My boyfriend and I went to a restaurant about 3 weeks ago, and the couple, let's call them Anna and Jack, that was sitting at the table behind us had some trouble with their credit card while paying for their drinks. We assumed they were tourists because they were speaking English, not a language often spoken in my country, and the elderly waiter didn't understand anything they were saying. So I turned around and asked them what was going on in order to help them out. For some reason, the guy's credit card was declined and they only had euros, which are still not an official currency here, so they couldn't pay with cash, and they were trying to ask the waiter where the nearest ATM was so that they could get some money and pay for their drinks. I then explained to the guy where he can find the ATM and told the waiter the guy would be right back and would take care of the bill. Since his girlfriend stayed in the restaurant and sat there waiting for him, I made a joke about how people over 50 can't speak a word of English in my country. And we started talking, so we invited her to sit with us because you could tell she was really uncomfortable just sitting there all by herself, waiting for her boyfriend to get back. Anyways, about 10 minutes later, her boyfriend came back, paid for the drinks, and they invited us to get a beer with them because we helped them with the waiter and all. So my boyfriend and I agreed, and we went to a nearby bar. We started talking, and it turned out they had just moved here 2 days ago. Not going to say from which country, but let's just say Scandinavia. And they moved into a house just 2 blocks away from our apartment. We started talking about random stuff, and Jack said they just watched the movie It that afternoon. that it's their favorite movie or something. And I mentioned that I was dead afraid of clowns and I get really uncomfortable even talking about them. We each had 2 beers and they both seemed pretty cool, so we told them we were having a couple of friends over on Saturday to play some board games and invited them to come since they didn't know anybody in the city. They said that sounded cool and we exchanged phone numbers. So here comes Saturday and our friends come to our place and we're waiting for Jack and Anna to come over. And Anna texts me that they're outside and they have a little surprise for me. I buzz them in and they come up. They ring the doorbell and my boyfriend lets them in. And I go in the hallway and they're both putting on Pennywise masks and waving at me while laughing. I got so creeped out that I started screaming, "What the heck is wrong with you guys?" And they just continued to laugh for like 10 seconds and then took off their masks and told me to relax and that it was only a joke. It was a very weird and awkward night after that. And they took off about an hour later because they had to take their dogs out for a walk or something. And to be honest, everybody felt relieved they went home so soon because they both came off as very rude and wouldn't even talk to our friends the whole night. She texted me around midnight saying she was sorry, and as soon as I texted her back saying it's not a big deal and everything is fine, even though that wasn't really true, she sent me a gif of a sad clown with sorry written under the pic. I don't know what the heck is wrong with both of them and why they thought messing with me like that is funny. What makes me more angry is the fact they were both so nice and seemed like a great couple to hang out with the day we met them, but turned out to be rude and weird. Both I and my boyfriend blocked their numbers and we hope we don't run into them anytime soon. This did not dawn on me until I had my own children and have hence been vigilant with stranger danger. Suddenly, one day, I sat up and realized the actual danger I was in and how close I came to who knows what. I was about 10 and staying with my grandma, something I did and loved for a week every holiday. My grandma lived in a new suburb on the outskirts of our city. Because it was new, there were a lot of new immigrants who started to move in there. There was a wave of immigration from Lebanon due to the war there, asylum seekers. This was a very white Australia, so my 10-year-old mind found these people bizarre with their different clothes, etc. Anyway, I was sort of playing by myself and sort of playing with the new kids in this church parking lot, down the road from my grandma's. I was the only blonde Anglo out of about 20 kids of all ages, 2 to 12 years old. I think that's why I may have been singled out, because I stood out. So this little girl about my age was sort of trying to play with me. She was so foreign to me with her hijab and a long black dress, in a 40-degree Aussie summer. I blurted out to her, "Why are you wearing such an ugly dress?" Because I was raised by very compassionate parents, my shame rose up in me immediately. But no more than when I looked around to see if anybody heard me, and there stood a man just staring at me. I thought at the time he heard me. I was so ashamed and thought he might come over and speak to me about my mean girl comment or tell my grandma, or worse, ring my parents. I was 10 and all adults had a line to each other, LOL. I now realize he wasn't even close enough to hear me, but my 10-year-old had at the time thought him watch me from 10 meters away, sort of behind a tree, over 2 to 3 hours was because he was deciding how to punish me for my crime. Anyway, it started to get dark. Everybody started to disperse for bath, dinner, and bed. I got up and started to walk back. The man started to follow me. He followed me to my grandma's. I ran inside and shut and locked the door. I was waiting for his knocks to tell my grandma my crime, but instead nothing came. Phew, he must have changed his mind. But as I took a sneak peek out of the window, I saw him go down the side of the house. Oh no, he's going in the back to tell her. Shame. But nothing. Oh, thank you. Just as I was going to bed, I looked out my back window and there he was, smoking something, standing under the clothesline, still weighing up whether to tell my grandma. I kept taking sneak peeks and he was still there till I fell asleep. The next day, my grandma said my bedroom flash screen and my bathroom flash screen were off their windows. That I must have done it because they couldn't just fall off. She also said I was not to try and force my window open if it sticks next time, because all the wood around the window was all chipped and broken. I said no, I didn't do it, but she didn't believe me. Not a crotchety grandma. She let it go. And do you know I never ever connected that it must have been that man trying to get in? Because it was my window and my bathroom window. In my head, he was there to speak to grandma, so there was no connection. I never thought of him again until just last week. I'm an aware adult now, and have just realized how close I came to who knows what. Edit. My grandma was very security conscious, so all windows and doors were always latched shut at night, regardless of the weather. The windows were those old-fashioned push-in casement windows, so the fly screens were all on the outside, which in turn were nailed into the window, so they had to be pried off. so he went to a lot of effort to get them off and would have had to use a tool like a chisel or knife. Probably used the same tool to try and open the window, hence the broken wood. Not my story, but my dad's. Around 40 years ago, when my dad was still in college, he moved quite a ways from Vietnam to New Haven, Connecticut for college. He wanted to be as near as possible to his college, but also wanted to overlook the city skyline. He had already received the Form I-20 and went to the counselor at the U.S. Embassy to try and get an M student visa. He was a first-generation immigrant, and though he had taken a fair amount of English classes in Vietnam, he wasn't fluent and knew nothing about housing in America. This is why he went the cheap route and ended up renting out a sketchy place. Some sketchy apartment somewhere near Pine Tree Drive in West Haven. His landlord, as he told me later, gave off some serious red flags that he sort of brushed off because the apartment was only $250 a month. Firstly, the landlord's abode was directly next door to that of my dad's, and during his first night there, while he was getting unpacked, he heard a high-pitched screeching and weird opera music. Again, he brushed it off for the same reason as said above, and also because he was very tired. The next morning when he awoke, he noticed a chair by his bed that wasn't there before, and when he went to the bathroom, his toilet seat was up, though he recalled putting it down. Not only that, but his door was unlocked. He brushed it off again because he didn't want to stir anything up with his landlord by asking if he had come into his room or by asking if it had been broken into, therein implying that the apartment was insecure. He also wanted to explore West Haven as his college year did not begin until late August. He had come 3 weeks early as he left. He specifically remembered locking his door behind him, but when he returned after a few hours out, he noticed that not only had the door been unlocked, but it was slightly ajar. This went on for weeks until his college year began. Things slightly moved from where he had left them. Articles of food were missing from his fridge and other weird happenings occurred. Finally, my dad had had enough. One night, he decided to stay awake until very late and try to catch whoever was doing this red-handed. That night, he finished his homework and then got into bed, but he remained awake. And sure enough, at around 2 in the morning, he sees his door handle turning and a hand sliding through. My dad froze, with his blood running cold. He saw the landlord creep in and take some eggs from the fridge. Not only that, but the landlord then went to the bathroom, coming out a couple of minutes afterwards, and then he slipped out once again, leaving the door unlocked. This creeped my dad out like hell, which is understandable, but for some stupid reason, he still decided to stay at the apartment for a few more nights before he finally confronted the landlord. Money and wanting to save it does some stupid things to the brain, I guess. This was before mobile phones and even decent cameras that didn't cost more than $100, and so my dad had literally no way to get evidence to show the police, besides mere accusations. The next night, he once more heard the odd screeching and weird opera music coming from his landlord's room, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. That weekend, when his landlord went out shopping, he broke into his landlord's room, and what he found there was seriously disturbing. First of all, he found some weird sex doll, but when he investigated further, he found an old Kodak camera. Under this were some extremely low-quality pictures of him in bed sleeping. He noped the heck out of there, obviously, taking the pictures with him and went to the police station. He moved out there shortly, and he later heard that the same landlord had scared other residents of the apartment off after hearing the odd screeching and opera music, and after seeing all of their things moved around. The building my dad lived in was since torn down, and my dad decided to just dorm at Sigma Chi. He had at first opted to stay away from fraternities because of the heavy partying. We never knew what happened to the landlord, only that he would be facing some prison time. I seriously hope he was never allowed to be a landlord again, though. This happened 2 hours ago, which in my time zone is approximately 1:15 a.m. I'm from Texas, born and raised, along with everybody else in my family. During the summer, a huge activity for every Texan, as well as non-Texans, is to go tubing down rivers. Unfortunately, due to work schedules, our friend group could never settle on a day in time to go tubing, especially considering that we lived about an hour away. Then we realized that we could just go at night after everyone is off work, which is completely legal, by the way. Several times this summer, we have floated the river without a hitch. We mostly worry about snakes. However, due to the cold water and cooler temperatures, they are not too much of a worry. But what happened tonight was much, much worse. My cousin just turned 21. To celebrate, we gathered up some of our friend group who could make it, which happened to be 6 males and 2 females. My cousin and I were the females. We floated it once through, and decided that we wanted to go a second time, which I was opposed to, but I was definitely outnumbered. I had a funny feeling but brushed it off as being tired and cold. We skipped the beginning part of the river to be closer to the exit. However, that also meant we were closer to the darkest part of the river, but we had just floated it 20 minutes prior, so it should be fine, right? As we were floating into the darkness, we started to hear voices and finally see two males standing on the bank. One was heavier set, the other was skin and bones. They yelled, "Hey, do y'all want some marijuana?" We immediately told them no and proceeded to float by. I was at the back of the group with two males next to me. One was holding my hand, the other my tube. As my foot neared the bank, the heavier man reached out and grabbed a hold of my foot, jumping in after us, attempting to pull me out of the tub. The skinnier one jumped in after and lashed onto my tub in an attempt to separate me from the group. I was frozen and I couldn't move. Couldn't think. I couldn't hear. I just knew I couldn't let my friend's hands go. They started harassing me, talking about my tits and how one of them had his hands full with his girlfriend, but the other was quote-unquote available. After a couple of seconds, they realized I wasn't letting go, so they backed off. When they backed off, a woman, out of nowhere, jumped into the middle of our group. She lashed onto tubes, then yelled, "I got some fishies," and began to make a cooing noise into the trees above us, asking everyone personal questions such as where we're from, how long we're staying, our names and ages, and finally asking for one of the guys' hats. Then she yelled, again, "I got some fishies," and began to make a cooing noise into the trees above us. We finally told her no, we need to leave, and she said, "I don't have COVID, but I have corona," and proceeded to spit on one of the members in our group. Repeatedly as we floated on, separating ourselves from them while trying to remain calm, waiting to reach the exit, we heard them talking. More than just three of them. We made a dash to the nearest exit and ran to our cars. When we all realized we were safe, we began thinking and asking ourselves questions. How many people were out there up in the trees, hiding in the bushes, lying down on the bank above us? Had they followed us? Had they watched and waited for us to get in the darkest part of the river? We called the local authorities to report the incident. I don't know if this is the right place to post this, but I just had a flashback memory and would like your thoughts on the situation. When I, 15 female, became best friends with this girl who we'll call Allie. We ended up becoming more than friends, but our relationship was sweet and pretty innocent. Her family was middle class and Christian and lived in a suburban neighborhood. She got along with her parents, but the whole family dynamic was just a bit odd to me. She had one slightly older sister. Her parents were older than most in our friend group, like approaching 60, and her dad used to be a pastor or something. Some very religious career, and had a lot to say about the Bible and such, which is why we were afraid to tell him we were in a gay relationship and just acted like besties. I remember early on Ellie telling me how they got kicked out of the church because of some very insane lies and rumors about them having some sort of sex ring in their house, and that CPS was called and is still an issue. I was confused, but it made her angry to talk about, so I didn't press on it. She seemed to believe none of it was based in reality, and that was the first weird thing. They didn't allow her to have her door closed, especially when she had friends over, but the house was empty most of the time. One day we were changing into swimsuits or something and turned away from each other. I was facing a mirror and I saw her dad peeking through the open door at us. We were both naked. I froze and pretended I didn't see him and hoped he'd go away. Then he was gone and never said anything. At the time, I thought it must have been an accident somehow, like he was just checking on us and didn't mean to see us naked. I don't know. Then Allie would tell me about these strange women who would come over and disappear into her parents' room for hours. Once her dad came back out to the kitchen, covered in sweat with a camera around his neck. Once he came into the room after Allie and I had a sleepover and she had gotten up to get ready for whatever. Sat with me on the bed and basically said that being gay is okay because I can't get his daughter pregnant and that it's a sin, but all sins are the same and that I might as well because we're all forgiven in the end, so nothing matters. I thought that was incredibly jarring at the time. I didn't know how he knew because we were only affectionate in private and even pretended to like boys. Never talked about it again. We broke up at age 17. There must have been more little weird things, but those are the main ones I remember. I don't know what I'm looking for posting this here, I guess. I'm just still confused about all of it. Edit. Another thing I just remembered is that they would have movies playing in the family room that my parents would have never played, like really intense sex scenes and such, and even when we were all eating dinner. I remember wanting to crawl out of my skin, but they acted like it was a normal movie scene. It blew my mind. In October 2020, I was working in a department store at Guest Services, and a woman came in with school supplies to return. She looked to be in her 40s and wore a scarf that covered her face and had in compliance with the mask order. She said the school supplies were a gift to the school, but she couldn't use them, so she was returning them. I had trouble finding the items in our system, and unfortunately for me, this gave her plenty of time to talk. At first, she was just texting with somebody using speech to text. Somebody who seemed to be checking up on her, asking where she was, what she was doing, and what she was thinking about God. She replied, "I'm at the store. I've been learning to ask God for things the way I would ask a husband." It gave me bad vibes, but I reminded myself it wasn't my business. Then the woman started talking to me again. She seemed dazed. Her speech was slow and odd, as if she didn't quite remember how to string words together, but not slurred or drunken. She went on for a while about how she suffered financial losses during the pandemic, but found a new church and having faith was everything to her now. Really, it is a blessing. Being deprived of things, even food. That's how you find God. She started getting a bit pushy, forcing a connection like she wanted to convert me, but I tried to be polite and ignore my hang-ups. A lot of customers needed emotional support at that time, and it wasn't the first conversation I'd had that was a little too personal for me. I said things like, "It's a dark time for you right now. It's important to have something to help you get through." All the time thinking, who is checking up on her? Did somebody deliberately deprive her of food? Is that why she's out of it, or is she in a cult? She kept staring at me the whole time I wrestled with the return and eventually noticed my scars. "My daughter has the same problem as you," she said out of the blue. So I told her that it's the devil making her do that. I didn't know what to say at that point, so I just kept updating her on the return. Then she started reading my name off my name tag over and over. Jesse, Jesse, Jesse. Slowly and strangely. It made me wish I hadn't worn my name tag that day. I didn't like her knowing my name. I didn't want her to know anything about me, really. I finished the return as quickly as I could and pushed the items I couldn't return back at her. "Sorry, but they're no longer in our system. I hope you can find a use for them." "Thank you." "And Jesse?" "Yes?" "Here's my face." She pulled down the green scarf and flashed a huge grin at me. "Okay," I said blankly, and she finally left. I signed out of the register and went to take 5 in the back room. I've had some bad interactions at work before, but this is by far the creepiest. I still wonder about this woman and her daughter. Did I meet a cult member? Was cult abuse leading her daughter to insanity, or was I just jumping to conclusions based on my own bad experiences and too much true crime? I hope they got away from any bad influences in their lives and are doing better, but also I hope this woman stays away from me. Hello there. A friend of mine suggested I tell this story after I told him it. I'll try to keep it short. My father died in 2009 after a heart attack. Ironically, while helping build a table in a church. I had recently turned 18 when it happened and was thrust in the unpleasant process of funeral arrangements. With the help from my family, we were able to set up a funeral at that very same church because life is ironic a lot. At that funeral, I was with my family greeting people at the door and showing them in. I was sullen, broken, and angry with the world at large as I shook each person's hand and offered them some token thanks for coming. I knew all the faces that came by, if some only distantly, until this woman came through the line with a very large wrapped package in her arms. Funerals, at least as I know them, aren't usually the time for gifts, so she immediately caught my attention. She was about 5'6" with long black curly hair and seemed to be in her late 50s, which would fit her knowing my father. She came up and shook my hand rather enthusiastically considering the setting and said, "Hi, I'm Monica. I know your dad very well and he'd want you to have this." As she pushed the package into my arms, I immediately felt it and knew it was a book. A big one. Not big as in thick, but long and wide in the cover, about 2 feet by 1 feet, respectively. This being not the time for it, I set it aside and continued the funeral, but not before she gave me a big hug out of nowhere. I assumed that Monica attended the funeral and left afterwards, but I never saw her leave. In fact, neither I nor any of my family had ever heard of her. I asked the people who helped me put it all together, and they had no idea who she was at all. No call logs, no social media messages, literally nothing. In fact, we kept my father's death specifically off of social media because even at the time I saw Facebook for being the incredibly terrible place that it had been proven to be. Nobody had heard of her, to the point that I thought she might be crashing random people's funerals. But she knew my father supposedly, I know this because inside the book she gave me is a handwritten inscription that is a bit too personable for me to share verbatim, but it was definitely referring to my father by name. Lastly, that inscription was written as though it was a gift being given to my father and was dated at the end with the date of his birthday in 1984, 25 years before the funeral. The funeral got done and sucked, as funerals do, and we started the process of going through all my dad's stuff. I eventually looked at the book we got, and it was called The Secret Teachings of All Ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy by Manly P. Hall. As I started to look through it, what first caught my attention was how expensive the book looked and felt. Thick parchment, a well-made spine and cover, and meticulously written from what I could understand at the time. I had only made it through 2 pages before my head just felt numb. The book is huge, but the font on the inside is pretty small comparatively. Then there were the illustrations. Massive full-page pictures depicting some of the weirdest symbology I'd ever seen. Pictures of gods, rituals, expensive tables on elements in different worlds. There's a picture just about every 3rd page, even more strange than the last. All the pictures looked old. I'm not an art guy, but this looks like the way old paintings were done. All of the illustrations were printed into the book, not drawn there originally. I've read a small bit more now that I'm older and can understand the writing a lot better. It seems to be written in a way that it describes the philosophy and rituals of each of the named groups, as well as the history of those rituals and the connecting line throughout. It does not take a stance on the validity of the information. Additionally, the edition I have is the Golden Anniversary edition, and I have found that the original edition was published in 1925. All of this is 100% true. I'll share a few pictures, including one of the illustrations I picked randomly. I really don't know what to do with the book. It could be worth something to sell, but for some reason I find that idea gross. I've been toying with making a YouTube series where I break it down a few pages at a time, but I think I'll only get views from moronic, anon people, and I don't want to feed that nonsense. I grew up around the world. My parents were divorced and they had joint custody, so every other year I lived with the other parent. Both their jobs required them to move every 1 to 3 years to a whole new country, so usually I'd only stay in one place for a year or 2. I moved to India in 1995 as a freshman. This was the largest school I'd ever been to. I was fat, pimply, and scared of the new school. I've always been good at making friends, but this school was harder. Most of them lived here their whole life, so it's hard to break into those circles of friends. But a large portion were similar to me, moving often, though not as frequent, and even they weren't so receptive to new kids either. Every fall we did something at the school called a mini course, or maybe a mini trip. Anyway, everybody in high school had to sign up for a 5-day field trip. There were tons. It was a pretty big school. Seniors got priority, of course. Some trips were like sailing the Ganges, or hiking some mountain, or riding trains to Arca. I can't remember except for the 2 I went on. In my freshman year, I went rafting the Ganges. It's exactly what it sounds like. 6 kids in a raft with an experienced rafter, and we went down different portions of the Ganges and camped in tents. There were 2 sophomores. We will call them RJ and Steve, though those are not their real names. They were the snotty rich kids, pompous and arrogant. They seemed to take a real liking to picking on me. I had been made fun of before, but this was rough. One morning, they tied my clothes together and threw them in the water and tied them to a branch. Stuff like that. The chaperone was kind of a jerk about it too. He asked me who did it, and I said, well, I can't prove it, what does it matter? And he said, that's what I want to hear. I mean, he heard and witnessed the harassment and never intervened. I was never one to tattle though. That's just not something I was raised to do. Anyways, it sucked because the rest of the year I didn't have any problems, but every time I saw these 2, they always did or said something, just being general bullies. Slapping my lunch out of my hand or unzipping my bag so my books would fall out. Over the summer, I hit a growth spurt and I went on a diet. I shot up about 5 inches in 6 months, and with good food and exercise, I was looking pretty good. I even made the basketball team as a sophomore. The coach was the chaperone from the previous mini course, funny enough, and I had made some more friends. RJ and Steve were always into weed, but now I think they were into some other stuff too. They looked different the next year and acted majorly different. Meaner, generally irritable, and they still tried to pick on me. But when I used to walk away, I could feel like they thought they had won. Now I could tell walking away annoyed them and made them angrier. The mini course came around and the coach wanted me on cycling some mountains or a range, something like that. He thought it would be cool for my conditioning, so I went, and sure enough, RJ and Steve were on the trip as well. I had the room next to them at the hotel, and I smelled weed all the time. Then we'd go out and ride some portion of the hills, then back again, and they would be smoking. At dinners and stuff, they would make jokes about me. I kept ignoring them until one of the seniors berated them for being bullies. They loved it. They laugh, and really, I think they just liked the attention. Going up to my room, I saw them in the hallway, and they threatened me that if I told the chaperone they were smoking, that they would stab me. I said, I haven't told them yet. Why would I do it now? The next morning, I was told to hang back and pick up some stragglers. Since I was riding pretty well, usually it was some freshman or a less athletic kid in the back. This time it was RJ and Steve. I slowed down for them and told them that we only had 10 minutes to get to the top. Steve threw a stick at my wheel. Then they both sped off laughing. It didn't do anything, but they were laughing as they went around the corner and out of sight. Then I heard, "Oh crap," and "Stop." As I came around the corner, I saw them both falling off the mountain and into the trees. I slowed down and looked over the edge. I could see a branch poking through RJ's arm. He was looking up at me, then down, then up, very confused. I couldn't see Steve. For a reason not known to me today, I didn't do anything. I kept riding. I don't know why. I was raised to always do the right thing and help people, but at that moment, I felt like they deserved it. I know they didn't, but I thought they did for some reason. It was a real battle in my head. I got to the top of the mountain and the chaperone asked if everyone was up. I said, I think so, but I didn't see Steve or RJ. I don't know why I lied, but it was weird. It was so natural and I didn't even feel like I was saying it. The chaperone rode back down to the mountain to find them. The other chaperone guided us back on the route that we were going. When we got back to the hotel, they were loading RJ and Steve into a van. This was like 2 hours later, by the way. It wasn't an ambulance. I guess the van was faster. Anyways, they were bloodied and black in some spots. Steve's whole head was wrapped, and when he leant forward, blood would pour out of his nose like a faucet. Then the Indian guy would push his head back. I looked right at RJ and didn't say anything. He was on morphine or something and was completely out of it. There was so much blood on his shirt and pants. They both came back after Christmas break. RJ before Steve. RJ's arm was still in a cast and his foot was in a boot. Steve had this scar between his eyes where he fractured his skull. It was actually really bad. Something you definitely don't forget. His skull didn't look set right or something. Like it kind of shifted. It wasn't as noticeable as the scar though. I heard them talking to girls sometimes, saying how the morphine felt so good and they should switch over to that. In general, they didn't seem all that different. They weren't humbled. The only difference was they never bullied me again. One time Steve said something and RJ stopped him. I only thought about that today because the company I'm freelancing with just acquired another startup. The last time I was working at a company that bought another company was in 2012. They were based in San Jose. Anyway, I wasn't so high up in the company that I'd be there for any implementation or integration that they were going to do. That's not even my department. But when our VP got back, he said it went well, but one of their engineers said, I thought my real name was coming. I really wanted to ask him something. I asked what his name was. He said Steve. It didn't ring a bell until he made a motion between his eyes, and I instantly knew it was him. So I said, yeah, if I ever need to go out there, I'll pop in and see what he wants. And then the VP said that wasn't possible because he was one of the people that was let go. In 2015, I actually had to go out there for some work, so I thought I'd ask around and see where I could find him. The project manager I was working with told me over lunch that it was a real mess and that he told her, I have a plan not to get fired. Once he did, he just went off the rails, got really into drugs, and died some other way. I did track him down on LinkedIn and Facebook, and he had passed away. His LinkedIn said that he worked at the company, so I'm pretty sure it was him. But I just wonder what his plan was to not get fired and that he wanted to tell me. I always wonder about the time I hear acquisition, especially now, and I honestly think about how I acted. It was so out of character for me. I don't necessarily feel guilty about it though, and it's weird. I really felt like I was on autopilot when it all happened. Okay, so buckle up because this is going to get weird. This isn't something unknown amongst my friends and the people local to me as I live in quite a small town. Please let me know if I broke any rules and I will be sure to edit. So in grade 9, I would have been about 13 or 14. I had no friends. I was and still am kind of weird, and it threw people off. Making friends in high school for me was so difficult because I refused to change who I was just to fit in. During the second week of school, I met George in my English class. Our school teacher had sat us next to each other and we had begun talking and building a friendship. George was very nice and we had a lot in common. He had come from a different elementary school. It was odd because the people from his elementary school commonly went to a different high school, although he insisted that he wanted to go to this high school because there were certain classes he wanted to take that the other school didn't offer. After about a week of talking together during English, he asked if I wanted to eat lunch with him. We had the same lunch period and he said he noticed how often I sat alone to eat. I thought it was the nicest gesture, so I agreed. We ended up having lunch together for a while, but then I started to make some new friends. I always invited him to eat lunch with a few of the friends that I had made, but he always declined. Then one day in English class, he passed me a note. This was very strange since we were sitting right next to each other. The note said something like, "I need to talk to you. Can we please sit alone together for lunch?" I wrote back that I would sit with him and we hardly spoke the rest of the period. I got a really strange vibe. So it's lunchtime and I see him sitting at the end of the row. Our cafeteria consisted of large harvest tables and benches. It was not separate tables with chairs like you see in a restaurant, but rather long tables with benches on either side. I go to sit down and he says, "No, we gotta go outside." So I agreed. He looked very upset and I wanted to know what was going on. When we got outside, he led me over to sit on a curb in front of the school and started talking very aggressively. He told me that it was unfair of me to make other friends when he was the one who befriended me first. He told me that I had to eat lunch with him because when I was alone, he ate lunch with me, so now that he's alone, I was obligated to eat with him. It was a very bizarre conversation. I explained that he could sit with me and my friends and that there wouldn't be any issues and he could even make some new ones. I told him I had enough friendship to spread around and that he had nothing to be upset about. What he said next completely shocked me. I could see the anger in his eyes. He grabbed my arm and said, "I don't think you understand. You owe me this, and you will sit with me." I got completely freaked out at that point and told him that we could sit alone together every other day. I just wanted to get away from him and go back inside where more people were around. After this day, I started getting weird messages in my email. I'll never forget the first email I was sent. It said, "All women are Satan. The devil lives in you all." I didn't recognize the email address and assumed it was some internet troll trying to scare me. Then they started coming more frequently, all with the same type of message. I started getting scared, so I showed my friends these emails. They agreed it was weird, but also agreed that it was probably some random person trying to scare people. But my one friend, Stacy, told me that she thought it was George, that she had heard stories about why he came to our school instead of going to the high school his grade 8 graduating class was going to. She told me that he was obsessed with one of the girls in his class and that her mom actually got a restraining order against him over the summer. I told her that sounded insane and I didn't really believe it. I was still having lunch with George on alternate days and we were still friendly during English class, but I really wanted to distance myself from it. After Christmas break, our schedules changed for second semester. I was honestly very happy about this because I knew I'd have a different lunch period than George and we wouldn't have English together anymore. I could slowly dissociate myself from him, but I was wrong. He started leaving notes in my locker, confessing his undying love and explaining that we were meant to be, to take over the world together, which at the time I thought was very nice of him to say, but the feelings were not mutual. Eventually, I had to tell him that enough was enough. I explained that he was overwhelming me and that I needed a little bit more space from our friendship. He seemed to understand, and he didn't get upset or yell. He just agreed to give me my space, which lasted about 2 days before the emails started getting worse. Started threatening my life, telling me they knew where I lived and went to school. I went straight to my mom when this started happening. I know I probably should have done that sooner. She called the police, and the police informed the school, and the school looked up the email in their records and found out that it was George sending the nasty emails all along. George was suspended and wouldn't even look at me anymore. I was honestly relieved. 1 year after we graduated high school, George and his mother went for a drive. While she was driving, he stabbed her over 100 times. He had a psychotic break. When the police found him, he tried saying it was a car accident, but when they questioned him about all the stab wounds, he admitted to killing her and trying to release the devil from his mom's soul. He pleaded insanity against the murder of his own mom. He was found not criminally responsible for her murder,